One of the most common female tests men experience and almost never recognize is the emotional stability test. This test isn't logical, verbal, or direct. A woman rarely thinks, "Let me test him now." Instead, it happens instinctively. She shifts her energy, changes her mood, pulls back slightly, becomes quiet, or introduces mild emotional tension, all to observe one thing: does this man stay grounded, or does he emotionally unravel? Most men think attraction is built by saying the right words or making the right moves. But women are far more focused on how a man handles emotional fluctuation. Life is unpredictable. Emotions rise and fall. Feminine energy naturally moves through waves. So before a woman allows herself to feel safe, attracted, or attached, she needs to know if the man in front of her can remain steady when things are not perfectly smooth. This is where the test begins. She might reply slower than usual. She might become quieter than before. She might challenge you lightly or act slightly distant. She might show a sudden change in tone. None of this is random. It's information gathering. She's watching closely to see if you panic, overthink, chase reassurance, or try to fix the emotional shift. Most men fail right here. They interpret emotional changes as danger. Silence feels like rejection. Distance feels like loss. And instead of staying calm, they rush to regain control. They send extra messages. They explain themselves unnecessarily. They ask, "Is everything okay?" over and over. They become reactive. In doing so, they unknowingly signal emotional instability. From a woman's perspective, this is a red flag. If a man collapses emotionally over small shifts, what happens when real stress enters the picture? What happens when life becomes chaotic, uncertain, or uncomfortable? Her attraction doesn't shut off consciously. It fades quietly, instinctively, because her nervous system no longer feels safe. A man who passes this test does something very different. He notices the shift, but he doesn't internalize it. He stays present without chasing. He remains warm without seeking reassurance. He doesn't change his self-image based on her mood. His emotional center stays intact. This doesn't mean being cold or indifferent. It means being emotionally regulated. He understands that emotions pass. He understands that feminine energy flows. He doesn't need constant confirmation to feel secure. And because of that, he becomes the calm in the emotional storm, not the storm itself. Women are deeply attracted to men who feel emotionally predictable in the best way, steady, grounded, and unshaken. When she senses that her moods don't control you, something powerful happens inside her. She relaxes. She feels safe to express herself fully. She feels free to be emotional without fearing consequences. That freedom is seductive. Another layer of this test shows up during conflict or tension. She may express frustration, disagreement, or emotional intensity just to see how you respond. Do you become defensive? Do you raise your voice? Do you shut down, or do you stay calm? Listen and respond without losing your frame. A man who remains centered during emotional pressure instantly stands out. He communicates strength without dominance and leadership without control. His calmness says, "I can handle emotion, mine and yours." And that ability creates trust at a biological level. Passing the emotional stability test doesn't require strategy. It requires self-mastery. It requires knowing who you are regardless of external validation. It requires being okay with uncertainty. It requires emotional discipline, not emotional suppression. When you no longer need her emotions to stay positive in order to feel confident, she begins to feel drawn to you more deeply because she senses that you are not fragile, you are not reactive, you are not dependent. And when a woman realizes that a man can stay calm in emotional movement, she stops testing him because she's already found her answer. One of the most subtle yet revealing female tests men experience is the boundary respect test. It rarely looks dramatic. It doesn't come with ultimatums or obvious disrespect. Instead, it shows up quietly in small moments that most men ignore or rationalize away. A late reply with no acknowledgement, a joke that crosses a line, a last-minute plan change, a mild dismissal disguised as teasing. None of these are accidental. They are signals designed to answer a simple question: does this man respect himself, or will he trade his standards for approval? Women don't test boundaries to control men. They test boundaries to feel safe. Safety, for feminine psychology, comes from knowing that a man has a spine, clear internal rules about what he accepts and what he doesn't. If a man allows small violations early on, she learns something important. His self-worth is negotiable. And when self-worth is negotiable, attraction erodes. Most men fail this test because they confuse tolerance with maturity. They tell themselves they're being understanding. They downplay behavior that bothers them. They laugh things off they didn't actually find funny. They avoid addressing issues to keep the vibe good. But what they're really doing is abandoning their boundaries to preserve access. And women feel that abandonment instantly. Passing this test doesn't require confrontation or aggression. It requires calm clarity. A man with boundaries doesn't overreact, but he also doesn't ignore what matters to him. He addresses it simply, without apology, without accusation, and without emotional charge. For example, when plans are changed last minute, he doesn't sulk or explode. He calmly adjusts or declines and moves forward without resentment. When a joke crosses a line, he doesn't lecture, he names it lightly and resets the tone. When something doesn't work for him, he states it once and lets his actions back it up. That calm enforcement communicates strength. Women are watching less what you say and more how you carry yourself while saying it. If you sound nervous, defensive, or eager to smooth things over, the test continues. If you remain relaxed, respectful, and firm, the test ends, because she's received the answer she was looking for. Another common mistake men make is over-explaining their boundaries. They feel the need to justify why something bothers them, hoping to be understood, but boundaries don't require permission. Over-explaining turns a standard into a negotiation. A man who respects himself states his boundary once and allows reality to respond. This doesn't mean being rigid or controlling. It means being consistent. Consistency builds trust. When your behavior aligns with your standards, women feel grounded around you. They know where you stand. They know what to expect. And that predictability, combined with emotional steadiness, creates attraction. It's also important to understand that boundaries are tested more when attraction is present. If she doesn't care, she won't test. Testing is engagement. It's her way of assessing whether she can relax into her feminine energy around you or whether she needs to stay guarded and in control. When a man fails this test, she often becomes more dismissive, not because she's cruel, but because she senses imbalance. If he won't protect his own time, values, or emotional space, she feels compelled to take control, or she loses interest. When a man passes, the opposite happens. She softens. She respects him more. She feels safer expressing herself. She stops pushing limits because she trusts that he can lead himself. Ultimately, boundary respect is about self-trust. Do you trust yourself enough to say no without guilt? To walk away without drama? To remain kind without being compliant? When a woman sees that you do, she doesn't need to keep testing. She already knows you're solid. And when she knows you're solid, attraction has room to grow. One of the most invisible female tests men experience is the validation-seeking test. It doesn't feel like a test because nothing obvious happens. There's no confrontation, no challenge, no emotional spike. Instead, something is quietly removed. Praise slows down, enthusiasm dips, warmth becomes neutral. Attention isn't given as freely as before, and in that space, a woman is watching one thing very closely. Does this man still feel solid when I stop affirming him? This test exists because women are deeply attuned to where a man's confidence is sourced. Is it internal, or does it depend on how she treats him? Is his sense of self stable, or does it rise and fall with her approval? She doesn't ask these questions consciously. Her nervous system asks them for her. Most men fail this test immediately. When validation decreases, they increase effort. They compliment more. They seek reassurance. They try to be funnier, nicer, more impressive. They fish for reactions. Their behavior quietly says, I need you to reflect my value back to me. And the moment that message is felt, attraction weakens. From a feminine perspective, this is not about cruelty. It's about safety. If a man's confidence collapses without external validation, it means his emotional center is unstable, and an unstable center creates anxiety, not desire. A man who passes this test does something radically different. When validation fades, he doesn't chase it. When warmth cools, he doesn't panic. When attention shifts, he doesn't personalize it. He remains exactly who he was before. This is not indifference, it's self-trust. He understands that attraction breathes. He understands that energy fluctuates. He understands that he does not need constant reassurance to know his worth. Because of that, his behavior doesn't change when hers does. His tone stays calm. His presence stays grounded. His standards stay intact, and that consistency is magnetic. Women are drawn to men whose confidence feels self-generated. Men who don't light up only when praised. Men who don't dim when ignored. Men who remain emotionally regulated regardless of external feedback. This tells her something powerful. This man is not trying to extract value from me. He already has it. Another layer of this test shows up when a woman withholds approval intentionally or unintentionally. She may stop complimenting. She may become neutral instead of enthusiastic. She may no longer mirror your interest. She is not being manipulative. She is observing. If a man responds by performing harder, he reveals dependence. If he responds by withdrawing emotionally, he reveals fragility. If he responds by staying steady, he reveals strength. Staying steady doesn't mean ignoring her. It means not needing her reaction to feel okay. You remain warm, but not needy, interested, but not anxious, present, but not performing. This balance creates polarity, because when a woman realizes that her approval does not control you, she begins to offer it freely again, not as a reward, but as a response to your groundedness. She relaxes. She feels less pressure. She senses that the connection is based on choice, not emotional hunger. This is where many men misunderstand confidence. They think confidence is bravado or dominance. But real confidence is quiet. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't look for applause. It doesn't collapse in silence. Real confidence says, I like you, but I don't need you to like me back in order to stay whole. That energy changes everything. It shifts the dynamic from approval seeking to mutual curiosity. It allows her to lean in without feeling responsible for your emotional state. It allows attraction to grow without pressure. And most importantly, it makes you feel emotionally safe to her because she knows she won't be managing your self-worth. When a woman senses that your confidence is anchored internally, she stops testing it. There's nothing left to verify. And that's when attraction deepens naturally. Another female test men rarely recognize is the emotional reactivity test. This one doesn't show up as drama on the surface. It appears as subtle emotional pressure, misunderstandings, delays in response, ambiguous behavior, or statements that could easily trigger insecurity if you're not grounded. What's being observed here is not how much you care, but how well you regulate yourself when emotional tension appears. Women are highly sensitive to emotional safety. Before attachment deepens, a woman's nervous system is scanning for one thing. Is this man emotionally predictable and centered, or does his mood swing based on what I do? This test answers that question. Most men fail it without realizing what's happening. A message goes unanswered longer than expected, and anxiety kicks in. A tone feels slightly off and they start overanalyzing. A small disagreement happens and they escalate emotionally. They defend, explain, justify, or seek reassurance immediately, not because the situation demands it, but because their internal state can't tolerate uncertainty. From the outside, this looks like emotional volatility. From the inside, it feels like urgency. And urgency kills attraction. A man who fails this test communicates, without words, that his emotional state is easily disturbed, that he needs external conditions to remain calm. That connection with him may come with emotional labor. Even if he means well, her system registers instability. A man who passes this test responds differently. When tension appears, he slows down instead of speeding up. When ambiguity shows up, he stays present without forcing clarity. When emotions rise, he remains calm rather than reactive. He doesn't suppress feelings, but he doesn't let feelings drive his behavior. This is not emotional coldness. It's emotional leadership. He understands that emotions are information, not commands. He listens without defensiveness. He responds without needing to win. He allows space without assuming danger. His tone stays grounded. His body language stays relaxed. His communication remains simple and direct. This creates contrast because most men mirror emotion automatically. If she's uncertain, they become uncertain. If she pulls back, they chase. If she's emotional, they escalate or shut down. This mirroring removes polarity and creates emotional chaos. The grounded man doesn't mirror, he stabilizes. And that stability is incredibly attractive. When a woman notices that small emotional shifts don't throw you off center, she relaxes. She stops scanning for threats. She feels safe expressing herself without fear of triggering insecurity or overreaction. That's when deeper emotional openness begins. This test also reveals how a man handles discomfort. Does he rush to resolve tension just to feel better? Does he avoid difficult conversations entirely? Or can he sit in emotional uncertainty without losing himself? Women are naturally drawn to men who can tolerate emotional discomfort without collapsing or controlling. That tolerance signals maturity. It says, I can handle complexity. I don't need things perfect to stay calm. Passing this test doesn't mean being passive. It means being intentional. You speak when clarity is needed, not when anxiety demands it. You listen without interrupting emotional expression. You respond from principle, not impulse. Your emotional state stays self-directed. This creates a powerful dynamic shift. Instead of her emotions dictating the direction of the connection, your grounded presence becomes the emotional anchor. She begins to feel led rather than managed, safe rather than responsible. And here's the key insight most men miss. Women are not testing to reject you. They are testing to relax. Every test is an attempt to see if she can stop being hyper-aware and simply feel. When she senses that you won't overreact, overcorrect, or emotionally spiral, she no longer needs to test. Her attraction deepens because her nervous system finally gets to rest. Emotional control is not about being unfeeling. It's about being unshakable. And when a woman feels that steadiness in you, her interest stops wavering and starts settling. One of the most misunderstood female tests is the emotional containment test. This is the moment when a woman expresses strong emotions, not because she wants solutions, and not because she wants reassurance, but because she is unconsciously checking one thing: can this man hold emotional intensity without becoming overwhelmed, defensive, or controlling? This test often shows up when things are going well. She opens up suddenly, she shares frustration, insecurity, or confusion. She becomes emotionally expressive, excited, anxious, or even slightly irrational. And most men misinterpret this as a problem to fix. They interrupt with logic. They try to calm her down too quickly. They invalidate without realizing it. Or they emotionally shut down because it feels like too much. What she's actually testing is not your intelligence or empathy. She's testing your capacity. Women are drawn to men who can contain emotion, meaning they can allow emotions to exist without being threatened by them, absorbed by them, or needing to control them. Emotional containment is the masculine ability to remain steady while emotions move through the space. A man who fails this test does one of three things. He panics and tries to fix her feelings so he can feel comfortable again. He collapses emotionally and mirrors her instability, or he detaches coldly to avoid feeling overwhelmed. All three communicate the same thing: emotional fragility. From her nervous system's perspective, this is unsafe. Not dangerous, but unstable. It suggests that emotional expression will come with consequences, that she'll need to manage his reactions if she wants to feel deeply. A man who passes this test responds differently. He listens without interrupting. He stays relaxed in his body. He doesn't rush the emotion away. He doesn't personalize what isn't about him. He allows her to feel without needing to change her state. This is incredibly rare. Most people are uncomfortable around strong emotion because it triggers their own unresolved feelings. But the man who can sit calmly while someone else experiences intensity sends a powerful signal: I am grounded enough to hold space. And when a woman feels that, something shifts. Her emotions begin to regulate naturally. She feels permission to be real. She feels understood without being analyzed. The paradox is that the less you try to manage her emotions, the more she feels emotionally safe with you. This test also reveals whether a man confuses empathy with absorption. Empathy is understanding. Absorption is losing yourself inside someone else's feelings. Women do not want a man who becomes emotionally flooded when they express themselves. They want a man who can acknowledge, validate, and remain himself at the same time. That balance creates polarity. You can say things like, I hear you, without adding solutions. You can say, that makes sense, without agreeing with everything. You can stay present without fixing, rescuing, or defending. Your presence becomes stabilized and not reactive. When a man consistently passes this test, a woman learns that she doesn't need to edit herself emotionally around him. She can express highs and lows without fear of destabilizing the connection. That freedom deepens trust and attachment. And here's the deeper layer most men miss. Women often increase emotional expression to see where your edge is, not to overwhelm you, but to locate the boundary where your center holds. If your center collapses, she pulls back. If your center controls, she resists. If your center holds, she settles. This is why emotional containment is leadership, not passivity. You are not being quiet because you're unsure. You're being calm because you're capable. The man who can hold emotional weight without needing to dominate or disappear becomes the emotional anchor in the dynamic. She doesn't lean on him out of dependency. She relaxes into him out of trust. And once a woman feels emotionally held without being constrained, her attachment deepens naturally. One of the most decisive female tests, and one men almost never recognize in real time, is the detachment test. This is where a woman subtly checks whether your life is full on its own, or whether she has become the emotional center of your world, not because she wants distance, but because her attraction depends on freedom. This test shows up quietly. She becomes less available for a few days. She delays plans without explanation. She pulls back attention, warmth, or consistency. She watches how you respond when she is not immediately present. What she's observing is not how much you like her. She already knows that. She's watching to see whether your sense of self collapses without her validation. Most men fail this test instantly. They overtext. They ask what's wrong. They seek reassurance. They subtly pressure her for clarity. They adjust their mood, schedule, and energy around her availability. From their perspective, they're being caring or communicative. From her nervous system's perspective, something else registers emotional dependence, and emotional dependence kills desire. A man who fails the detachment test communicates, without saying it, my emotional stability depends on your presence. That creates pressure, and pressure makes a woman feel responsible for managing your state. No matter how attracted she was before, her body starts to pull away. A man who passes this test behaves very differently. When space appears, he doesn't chase it away. When availability drops, he doesn't panic. When attention shifts, his life keeps moving forward. He remains warm but not reactive, interested but not attached to outcome. This doesn't mean ignoring her. It means responding from choice rather than fear. He replies when it's natural. He keeps his tone steady. He continues focusing on his mission, friendships, health, and purpose. His life doesn't pause because someone else becomes uncertain. This signals abundance. Abundance is not about options. It's about internal fullness. A man with abundance energy enjoys connection, but doesn't need it to feel complete. His emotional state is self-generated, and women are deeply attracted to that. Why? Because detachment signals freedom, and freedom is magnetic. When a woman feels that a man doesn't need to control the connection to feel secure, she feels free to lean in. There's no emotional debt, no unspoken pressure, no fear that pulling away will cause collapse. Ironically, the more relaxed you are about outcomes, the more she invests emotionally. This test also exposes how a man relates to uncertainty. Does he rush to close emotional gaps? Does he demand consistency to feel safe? Does he need constant contact to stay grounded? Or can he sit calmly in uncertainty, trusting himself regardless of outcome? Women instinctively seek men who can tolerate uncertainty. Life is unpredictable. Emotions fluctuate. A man who stays centered when things are undefined signals resilience and leadership. Passing the detachment test doesn't mean playing games or pretending not to care. It means caring without clinging. You can enjoy her presence without fearing her absence. You can desire connection without chasing validation. You can stay open without losing yourself. This balance is rare and powerful. When a woman senses that your happiness, direction, and identity exist independently of her, she feels safe to attach. Not because she's needed, but because she's chosen. And here's the paradox: when she realizes she is not your emotional oxygen, she often becomes more curious, more engaged, and more invested. Because attraction thrives where freedom exists. The man who passes the detachment test becomes a place of rest rather than pressure. A man she can step toward without losing herself because he never lost himself to begin with. And when your presence feels like an invitation instead of a requirement, her desire deepens on its own.